All right, welcome everyone. We had a little bit of a bumpy technical start there. I've never had that happen in, 4 years of doing webinars. So my apologies, and thank you so much for staying on, those that did. We did have quite a few drop off, which is unfortunate. All right, so let's just get rocking and rolling into the content for today. Feel free to keep asking questions throughout the presentation, as those of you that have been on this know how to do through the question area, or I'm going to go ahead and drop all the hands down now, and you can also just raise your hand if you'd like to be unmuted. All right, let's get going. So one of the things that I am so passionate about this topic is because when I was writing my book, The Outstanding Organization, which was released in July 2012, one of the things that kept coming up to me is that the whole, decades and decades of improvement that we've been doing here and the whole way we're managing people is completely upside down. And I didn't have the page count available in my book to go into it in great detail. So there's literally 3 paragraphs on the topic that I'm talking about today in the webinar, and it may be enough to fill a whole nother book down the road. But I do want to talk about what we can do and what we absolutely have to do to turn the tide on poor performance across organizations and poor performance across Lean and Six Sigma programs. So one more quick thing before we get too far into this. Metrics-based process mapping is one of the means that I very much believe in for managing processes. So we're not going to touch on it in detail today, but I've decided to add one more webinar for 2012, which will be on Thursday, November 29th, specifically about metrics-based process mapping. And this links to the discipline part of my book, The Outstanding Organization. Many of you know that there are 4 key behaviors that I feel organizations are lacking by and large and makes it difficult to make relevant improvement, and that's clarity, focus, discipline, and engagement. And metrics-based process mapping is part of the discipline of process management. So this all goes together, but we can't accomplish everything in one webinar. So another webinar on Thursday, November 29th. I hope you'll join me. So the way I see the world in business management, business performance is that we've got 3 big problems. I'm going to go through each one of them. The first one is that most businesses aren't performing as well as they could and they need to. So in some cases, businesses are absolutely needing to perform far better than they are because of market pressures and financial pressures, and businesses go out of business every day because they aren't able to perform to the degree they need to. I have actually even a little softer spot in my heart for those that are performing at a certain level and they're not performing as well as they absolutely could. And when organizations are not fulfilling their full potential and able to perform the way they could, you have to wonder, what are the things that stand in the way of that? The common organizational woes, it really varies from organization, but those of you who are working for organizations right now probably are experiencing any combination of these issues, and those of you who are consultants and working with organizations probably experience a combination of issues that change from client to client. But the cause and effect of these various things, one begets the next, and so it's difficult to really put these in any kind of sequential order, but the bottom line is that we've got a lot of organizational performance that I believe can be solved through flipping our emphasis from managing people to managing processes. That's problem 1. Problem 2, when you have large organizations doing very important studies, and study after study after study is showing that improvement efforts are having minimal financial impact. So here we have almost 60% of CEOs and CFOs saying that their improvement programs like Lean and Six Sigma and CQI, TQM, those programs are having minimal financial impact, while those of us doing the work we do aren't always focused on specific improvements that are going to have a direct bottom line impact. Overall, that is what an organization wants to be achieving. And even not-for-profits have to be able to earn more and more money that they can reinvest in the organization. And so this is a problem that we don't have any greater impact financially. And then some of you have heard me talk about this before, but this is the thing that just always gets to me and kind of tugs on my heartstrings, that back in 1999, when the Institute of Medicine released the report that showed that anywhere from 44,000 to 98,000 deaths were caused every year due to medical errors, they put this very aggressive goal in place to reduce that by 50% in 5 years. Now, this slide that shows these airplanes, this is the number of airplanes, Southwest 737s, that would have to go down every year in order to get to the low end of that number, the 44,000. So imagine if it were 98,000. Now, one of the problems is, hang on one second, I just have to do one quick thing here to make sure that you're seeing what I'm seeing. There we go. I forgot to start that back when we started over again. So when you look at the results of that goal, that very aggressive goal to reduce the number of medical errors in 50% in 5 years, we haven't even come close. In fact, the numbers keep going up and up and up and up. Every year, the research is showing that it's worse. So again, you have to wonder, well, is it that the people that are leading improvement in these organizations aren't using the tools properly? Do they not have the greatest leadership team? Are they just not culturally able to, change the behaviors the way they need to in order to succeed? This is 4 times the number of planes that actually is looking like the latest reports are showing how many medical errors there are in the United States that people are dying from and being harmed every year. That's just unconscionable that we're allowing this to exist. So this webinar is the beginning of what I hope will be, a couple of years of us all getting extremely concerned and very active in figuring out the ways we can help all of our organizations finally achieve true process management. True process management. Not talking about it, doing it. We have to start doing it in order to get rid of these problems that, seem to not go away. Problem 3 is back to the workforce and thinking about what it is that make people able to be high performing in an organization and what are the things that get in their way of being able to perform in an organization. And the numbers, again, are not changing. When Gallup does the Q12 survey, which is one of the most popular employee engagement surveys, and they release the collective results every year, year after year after year, the numbers aren't changing. The number of people that are disengaged or actively disengaged in their organizations never change, and they hover around the total of 60% overall employees. And here's the thing. When a new hire comes to the door, it's like you had them at your hired. They're hopeful. They're looking to have a new experience, a better experience. They want to serve. Almost every employee I've ever met in all of my years of doing work really want to serve, and they come in, every morning hopeful that they're going to be able to do their job in the way that they could be most successful, contribute to the company, and also feel personally fulfilled. So this is where we need to start focusing our effort. And I've been saying for months now, if you had no other process, if you could only improve one process in your organization, the one process that I would pick first, shockingly, would be new employee onboarding. And it would be getting that process well honed so that people come into the organization, are given all the tools and the information they need at the beginning to start, and they're able to move on as a successful employee in the organization. What we have instead is workers coming into organizations who've been robbed of a variety of things that we need to have high-performing organizations, in my term, outstanding organizations. So workers have been robbed of trust and respect. They've been robbed of what they come into the organization with, the knowledge, skills, aptitude, creativity, and experience they have, and they've been robbed of the ability to maintain healthy interpersonal relationships. So what we tend to do in organizations, we tend to look at people as the problem. It's a rare leader that looks to the system or the process first, very rare. Some organizations have it better than others, and the more lean in every sense of the word an organization is, and I mean lean in terms of, Toyota production systems, Toyota business management practices, that type of lean, the closer they get to viewing process and systems as the reason for interpersonal tension versus it being people that are the problem. So what we get as a result of these environments that are not well run as far as processes being designed and managed on an ongoing end? Are these seemingly people problems like whiners and finger pointing and the tension or blatant infighting, turnover, outright sabotage? And then when you get down to the last two bullet points here, I'm a big believer that people spend far too much time in the workplace to not have what their experiences are day in and day out dramatically affect them personally and then ultimately societally. I really believe that the workplace is the place that we should be focusing our attention for solving a lot of social concerns as well as some of the more immediate needs that a company has by being more profitable and serving its customers better and providing greater value to customers. So I do believe that the type of workplace that we create causes physical and mental illness, or it can if it's not well designed, and there are the longer and bigger social consequences from people coming home at the end of the day feeling depleted and frustrated and having physical, sexual, and substance abuse that they turn to, or poor parenting, or divorce, or any number of things that really happen when people aren't feeling fulfilled during the workday. So this is a big deal, and I do believe that we have the ability, those of us who are in management roles or in improvement roles, to turn this around and have huge consequences in a positive way, huge benefits for everyone, personally, organizationally, and societally. So poorly designed processes are, in my opinion, the thing that causes what people perceive as being people problems. So when I work with HR departments, very often the kind of prevailing view is that people are the problem. And I lead a lot of value stream mapping activities and Kaizen events and A3 problem solving activities. And in 99.99999% of the time, when I get a team, there's some sort of tension between at least two players on the team. And it may be representative of interdepartmental tension or interdivisional tension, or it could be true interpersonal tension. And oftentimes the interpersonal tension is between a supplier and a customer within the organization. And so someone is providing information or material to someone else who is doing something with that and then passing it down the chain, and there's tension between that supplier and customer within the organization. 100% of the time, I'm not kidding, I rarely say always, but always to date, I have found that when you get into process design and get to the true root cause of process performance issues, the interpersonal, interdepartmental, interdivisional, intercompany tensions melt away and they don't come back. So we have the ability to solve all of these people problems, get rid of a lot of stress and frustration, help people feel fulfilled at the end of the day by managing processes and getting our processes so that they are smooth operating and people don't have to be bucking obstacles and trying to figure out how to get around obstacles every day of their lives as they do. So again, what happens is, and I catch clients doing this all the time, is the immediate response, because it's a conditioned response. These are habits that we have, mindsets and behaviors that have to be changed in order for us to be able to change anything organizationally. So these are deep-seated responses that we have to reverse in order to solve the problem. So I believe, and I talk about this in my book, The Outstanding Organization, that we create or fail to create high-performing employees in the way that organizations are operating and the way they treat their people, which is directly tied to the systems and the processes that are set up and how they function. So when I go into organizations, very often there's some level of mapping, either at the value stream level or at the process level, at some place along the way. And when you look at the process of step one, step two, and you look at the handoffs, and you start seeing the clunky nature and the way most processes are designed, it's no wonder that people get frustrated and act out and behave badly because they're not able to get their work done smoothly and efficiently. So here's the countermeasure to this problem that we're facing, or these three problems that we're facing. It's a single countermeasure for all three of those problems. And it's going back to what we've learned from Toyota. The pillars that form the Toyota way 2001, the overarching tenets that they operate with, that is of course, the foundation of lean, is continuous improvement and respect for people. And I'm being pretty provocative here by saying that I would argue that very few organizations are even remotely good at either one of them. And what I mean by that is very few organizations really have any sense of continuous improvement in place. We've been at this for decades now. It's time for us to change the tide on this. So what happens is, and you know it, you live it, you're working with clients, is what drives improvement is a fire. It's a reactive stance that we take to fighting fires. It's not proactive, and it's not about consistently raising the bar much of the time. Most of what we're doing in improvement is fighting fires, and it's very reactive. The other thing is that respect for people, I definitely have a fair number of clients where I feel that people are, well, they're always good people. Everyone I've worked with is a phenomenal person, but the prevailing culture is a very respectful culture in terms of how people behave toward one another, in terms of how they speak with one another. But it's not respectful in terms of how the organization has built its systems and processes. So respect for people, the third one here, well-designed systems and processes, is what enables people to be able to perform well and not have to have infighting and tension between people, because it's a very collaborative problem-solving process, and the problems eventually start going away because you get better and better managed processes, which requires a fair amount of discipline. So if we go back to our roots, continuous improvement, respect for people, we're starting to see right there some of the answers that we've been talking about. I mean, Deming talked about this when, in the 50s, and we still, in 2012, almost 2013, have not really come a long way in terms of this, permanent way of behaving in an organization that will get us where we want to go. So I want to do a little bit of an interactive thing here. So get your clickers ready to, or get your fingers ready to answer some questions. One of you, and I'm not going to name names, but one of you asked a question in the registration process for the webinar, and the question is this: how do we get the people to do the process the way it should be done? So I want you all to kind of digest that and suck that into yourselves, that question. And then the supporting question behind that same person was, for example, how can you invoke what seems to be a simple process of labeling samples at the bedside? So this is definitely a healthcare person from the healthcare environment. And what I'd like to ask you all to do is to just write some answers in the question box. I'm going to get ready to scroll down here. My first question is this: what is the problem? Let's do a little exercise, and let's take a crack at what the problem is that this person is alluding to. So go ahead and type in to the question box your response to what is the problem. And I'm going to start reading them off as they come in. Okay, so one person says the problem is lack of trust. One person says they're not engaging the people doing the work to design the process. Question is there a standard? Good, these are all good. Lack of awareness, what's the impact? Lack of training, standard process not being followed. Staff may find the current process inconvenient. Lack of education. Process is too complicated. Metrics don't support desired action. Lack of buy-in. Standardize the work. Process does not come from the floor. Not easy to do. Interpretation of the process. They don't know why the process is needed. Maybe that's not defined. Need to empower the users to determine what needs to be done. Process set by the ivory tower, not at the gemba. Okay. This is good. This is excellent. Old habits die hard, not one-piece flow. Insufficient availability of resources. There's a history of suggestions getting blown off by supervisors. You've got it. Get to the root cause. So one of the things that I think is interesting, excellent, thank you so much. These are all great answers. But one of the things that I find when I work with improvement professionals and managers and even executives is that we sometimes need to stop and really define the problem first before we start thinking about root cause. So what is the real problem, performance-wise? What is the real problem here? Because the question seems to allude that the problem is that people aren't following a process. That's not the problem as I see it. I'll let you think for a minute on that. What is the problem? So when I think about clarifying problems, I like to encourage people to think about the outcome of whatever it is that they're suggesting. What is the outcome of the problem? So here we've got a labeling samples problem at the bedside. The outcome of the problem is going to be something around, either mistaken results or possibly wrong medication being given because a sample got confused with someone else. That is the problem. Now, once we know what the problem is, now we have to go into, well, why is that problem occurring? And the first place that I would go is the process. What is the process? Is it written? Is it documented? Is it followed? Why isn't it followed? And when you go through the 5 whys, starting with the process, you will often uncover, in fact, in my world, always uncover that there's something far beyond the people doing the process that's at play. So I'll give you a little side story. I don't know about this specific problem because I haven't been actively engaged in this problem, but medication errors is one where people just assume that nurses need to be careful. Just be careful. If you're just careful, it'll go away. Well, the process in many organizations doesn't enable people to be successful. For example, nurses are often interrupted in the middle of giving medications. The Pyxis machines are often physically located far from the patient's rooms. There are all kinds of reasons why medications errors occur, and none of them have to do with nurses not being careful. They're all about systems and process design. And so, in the kind of uninitiated hospital, will constantly blame nurses, and then they wonder why they don't get medication errors reported. Well, it's because nurses aren't going to be sticking their neck out to report errors because they get blamed. And so we have to change our whole thinking, and the first reaction we have to a problem is, what's the process failure here? What's the process failure here? What's the process failure here? And this needs to become, those of you who lead improvement and those of you who are working with leaders, this needs to be the mantra. What is the process failure here? And we need to stop the behavior of immediately saying, I call it the 5 whos instead of the 5 whys, and get to what's really going on. So what I think is very common, what I see is very common, are a whole litany of process management problems that, again, I just question why it is that we're in 2012 and we've been at this improvement game for decades and decades and decades, and why it is that we still aren't focusing on the thing that really matters, and that's process management, process design. Still, I go into organizations that have been at improvement themselves with full-time dedicated resources for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And when I ask where are their documented processes, they may have, maybe, best case scenario, 10% of their processes, major processes documented. And so, you have to look at that and say, well, that's the problem. I mean, if people aren't following a standardized, as much as makes sense, a standardized process that has key performance indicators, and someone is watching this process and continuously improving it to either raise the bar when performance is going well or to solve problems the minute a trend starts occurring and before it comes a fire. If you don't have that dedicated attention on process management, there is no way an organization can perform well. There is no way you're going to have a fulfilled workforce, and there is no way you can become an outstanding organization. So what we need to do is start getting serious about this. And if you want to set a great goal for 2013, I'd say that you start right now by rallying the troops and decide you're going to stop this, and you're going to execute this in X% of the organization in 2013, and you're going to get processes all documented. Improved would be great, but at least get the current state documented so that you can at least see what you're doing, put key performance indicators in, and then see how poorly the process is actually performing. Because if we're not measuring it, we don't even know how it's performing. So how do you do this? The first thing is you have to have a process doctor. You have to have a process owner. So let's think about what a doctor does. And let's just pretend like this is a doctor who we go to on a recurring basis. The doctor is constantly looking at how the processes or how the patient is responding to medication. They may be doing diagnostic tests. They may be looking at, physical symptoms of a patient, and they're constantly adjusting, or they should be constantly adjusting treatment based on what they're seeing. Someone who has a chronic condition, let's take a diabetic, they're constantly monitoring their blood sugar. And as the minute it goes up or goes down, then there's adjustments being made, or there should be adjustments being made to the medication. And most of the chronic diabetics I know, there are adjustments being made to the medication as their sugar levels are going up or down. Why don't we do that with processes? That's what we're in the business of doing, is managing processes so that we can be proactive and correcting things as it's occurring, not when it becomes a fire. So the process doctor, or the process owner is the term I use, is someone who has their eye on the ball. They are managing the process, they're minding the store, and they're continuously leading PDSA. PDSA, plan, do, study, adjust. PDSA, and that is their obsession, is PDSA. Now, what a lot of organizations think that I mean at first when I first start, raising this issue is, oh, it's someone who's going to actually, make the improvements. No, 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 no. The process owner doesn't make the improvements. The process owner leads the improvements. So the process owner's responsibility is to get the process performing as it should be through collaboration and consensus building and improving cross-functionally with all of the relevant parties involved. So here is what I would recommend, and this is what my clients are having tremendous success with in when they choose to accept this mission. And you can at least start with an experiment. If your leadership team is not warmed up to this idea yet, ask them if they'll let you do one experiment in one area. Designate or identify a process owner. This person has to want to do it because it's hard work. And that person, in my opinion, needs to be manager or below. Not manager or above, manager or below. Because director and above, for those of you that are in a hierarchical organization, really need to be focused on the bigger picture and how customers are being served and setting vision for the next year, doing budgets for the next year. It's bigger picture vision types of work. Manager or below gets closer and closer and closer to the work. So that's the first thing, is this person has to be fairly close to the work being done. Second, that person needs to be granted responsibility or given responsibility for overall process performance. And that means that they're they're tracking performance against targets, so they need to know what the targets are. So obviously you need some key performance indicators in place. They lead corrective action when any kind of trending starts going in the opposite direction of where it should be going. And they lead continuous improvement when things are going well to progressively raise the bar. So that's their responsibility. Now the key is, and this is the missing link in many organizations when they first try this, is they have to be granted authority to cross the org chart boundaries. And they need to be widely recognized across the organization that they possess that authority to cross org chart boundaries. So this is another, kind of a shake the foundation kind of thing, is that org charts, I'm not against org charts. In fact, I love org charts. I think the problem with org charts is they're not being used and kept up to date as well as they should be. I also don't have a horrible problem with hierarchical organizations. I think hierarchy can work really well in a well-designed organization. Toyota is extremely hierarchical, and they do a fantastic job of getting problems solved. So I'm not saying that. What I am saying is, let me go back. What I am saying is that the person that's the process owner needs to be able to go in and rally troops all across all of the functions that are involved in a process. So what that means is you need to have your processes all documented cross-functionally so it's very clear who needs to be engaged in solving a problem. So this happens to be the Excel tool that Mike Osterling and I developed that go along with our metrics-based process mapping approach This is process level, not value stream level. But once you get processes well documented that cross functions, then it becomes very clear who needs to be involved in improving the process. And so you see on the left side here, we've got all the functional areas, and then we have, step 1, 2, 3, 4, or in this case 6, 7, 8, 9, with some key metrics. And it's the process owner's responsibility to pull together representatives, the relevant representatives, from all of those cross-functional areas in order to get improvement solved or in place. Now, I'm going to make a comment for those of you who are full-time improvement professionals. In my opinion, the process owner should never be a full-time improvement professional. It should always be someone directly managing the work that's being done, kind of on the line. It doesn't have to be line level, but a manager in the line, not a third party. And the reason why is that the other thing that we've had all wrong, back to the title of the webinar, is that for some reason we seem to think of improvement as being separate from doing the work. And improvement needs to be part of doing the work. If we continue to view it as a separate activity, then we're never going to get people, first of all, developed into being proficient problem solvers, giving them the authority to solve problems real time, and for processes to eventually be well functioning because of that. So I do not believe process owners should ever be consultants or full-time dedicated resources to improvement within an organization. I think those are resources that are there to coach and teach, and that process owners must be the people that are managing the work being done or doing the work being done. So let's move on. Here's the org chart. Here's a fictional org chart for, I only went to the director level, but, of course it goes down manager, supervisor, team leads, etc. in a hierarchical organization. The process owner needs to have the authority to lead improvement across all those functional boundaries. So I have the director level highlighted here because if I'm going to go and, let's just say that there's a process problem and we want to go through a round of improvement. In most organizations, I think it makes sense to start at the director level saying, hey, here's the need, here's the key performance indicator, here's what's happening trending-wise. We really need to take a look at this, and I'd like to engage your department or your departments in this because, after all, they are part of the process. So I would start at the director level. In a very large organization, you could start at a manager level. In a very small organization, you might start at a VP level, but somewhere in there is where you raise the issue and say, Houston, we've got a problem and we've got to do something about it. Or, in the best case scenario, you don't have a problem, but it's time to raise the bar, and you're going to engage the right people in the process management method that you're going to be using internally. So the middle managers, to me, have been the one function within organizations that have been kind of left out in the cold with improvement. So very often we engage senior leaders in value stream mapping and getting strategic improvement plans in place, and Hoshin Connery or policy deployment or strategy deployment, and catch ball starting at leadership level. And so those folks are very actively engaged in at least planning for improvement. And then for those organizations who come a long way in terms of who should be doing improvement, I think many organizations are really good at engaging the front lines in making improvement. Those that have been on the lean journey for many years have gotten pretty good at that. What most organizations haven't gotten very proficient in yet is how and when to engage middle managers. So this is why I started looking around my own clients, and most of my clients are mid to large organizations. I have a few small clients, but the middle managers haven't been really actively engaged on either end. They're on teams, but they're not as actively engaged as they need to be. So I think if you had a choice between who you would look at as being a process owner, you might consider picking a middle manager and then coaching and developing them to be very proficient with root cause analysis and problem solving skills, very proficient in setting key performance indicators and measuring them, very proficient in getting visual management in place so that the KPIs are visually displayed, and proficient at continuously improving. So guess what this means? This means the middle managers have to have the bandwidth to play that role. And that is going to lead us down the whole path of, well, then how do you create the bandwidth? If they're fighting fires all day long, how do you do it? So here's the bad news. It's actually good news. But the bad news is that because organizations are so ingrained in firefighting, I believe you have to pull a cold turkey type of approach to this and just say, okay, middle manager, would you like to do this? Yes, I do. We think you'd be great at this. We want to develop you. Yes, I do. You have to remove activities from the middle manager's plate. They have to be given the bandwidth to do this. So they'll get better and better at process management, but the first time they start managing processes on a daily basis or a weekly basis, it's going to take many hours. Sometimes it can take up to half of their time initially getting used to managing processes and getting used to, how do you lobby people to get them engaged in cross-functional problem solving and all of those things that need to take place to be effective. So middle managers' functions need to change in order to allow for that process management role that they're taking on. This is the thing. Middle managers, when I go into a brand new organization that really isn't that mature yet in lean, all middle managers are doing is managing people. All they're doing is dealing with problems with Betty and Joe and Sally, and this person's not, coming to work on time, and this person's not doing this, and it's just an awful place to be. And when you start managing processes, all of those people management things go away. People want to come to work, so they're not coming in late. They're engaged. They're not having infighting because there's no obstacles to infight over. I mean, this is the thing that it's like, whoa, we just have to start all over again here and rethink what the role is of a middle manager. I so hope there are some HR folks on the line today because this is really, I believe, revolutionary on where we need to go over the next decade in order to stop the madness that we've been living for decades and decades and decades around poor process performance and then therefore people. So how do we turn the tide? The first thing is facing the truth always. If you want to break a habit, you have to be very clear on what the truth is of the current state and face the truth that processes by and large remain poorly managed in most organizations and people are being beaten up for no good reason. So let's just admit that this is our current state. And then we have a target condition that we're setting of processes performing very well, being managed on a very regular basis. I'm talking daily, sometimes hourly, certainly weekly at the least frequent method. And people need to be treated very, very well, and they need to be viewed as people who are merely operating within the system that's been created for them. And they're either going to be successful or fail based on the system that's been set up. Next, document all major processes. It's November. It's a great time to take stock, do inventory on your processes. Companies do physical inventory of material all the time. Do a physical inventory of your processes and figure out which ones of them are, documented, which ones are not, which ones are documented and current, which ones are not, which ones are performing, sort of well, and which ones are performing very badly. And put an action plan in place for 2013 on which ones are going to improve and get standardized and get documented and get all the proper training in place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, set your priorities and do them one at a time unless you can have completely different teams working in 2 completely different parts of the company and there's no overlap. Then, and by the way, you'll notice I have here improve upfront if time allows. So this may sound like blasphemy, but I very much believe this, that in order to turn the tide on this process management problem, if we wait for every process to be through an improvement cycle before we get a process owner identified and we get true process management in place, it's going to delay the inevitable of getting that process manager in place or process owner in place far too long. So I say even if the process isn't performing well, get it at least documented, determine what the key performance indicators should be, and then start going through problem solving and knocking out obstacle after obstacle after obstacle to achieving that target condition. So that's what I mean by improve upfront if time allows. If not, then get the processes documented and start improving once you have a process owner in place. Again, the role of the continuous improvement professionals and consultants is to coach and teach the process owner. It's to develop their capabilities so that they can do this on their own eventually. Next, define 3 to 5 key performance indicators for each major process, and the majority of them should be operational indicators, not financial. You can have one that's financial, but the bulk of them should be operational indicators, preferably leading indicators so that you can get problem solving more quickly than waiting for a lagging indicator when the end result has already occurred, but 3 to 5, no more than 5. Then identify a process owner. Ideally you have people that are wanting to do it and you don't have to beg people to do it, but if they understand what their role is, then I think most people would actually really like and relish that role. That's what I've seen at my clients. And then what you have to do, and this is critical, step 5 is critical, you need to socialize that role and the responsibilities of the process owner, because people who are used to an org chart are going to say, well, Sally, you belong in finance. What are you doing in customer service? And you have to get people understanding that it makes no sense to have no one looking over the whole process. It has never made sense. It will never make sense. And that now finally we have someone that's having a holistic eye and viewing the entire process. And that person isn't going to tell you what to do. That person's going to engage you in determining what the right thing is so that the process functions well. So get that socialization piece in place so that people understand what the heck this rocking the boat thing is around the org chart. And then begin managing the process. So that process owner, once those KPIs are set, starts managing it. And they start, it's pretty overwhelming at first. If it's a process that's never been well managed, there'll be a lot of problems. But you help the process owner go through them and prioritize. You help the process owner, gain the help and assistance and support of all the people that have to be engaged in solving the problem, whether it's through a Kaizen event or it's an A3 exercise, or it could be a very simple problem. It's just a simple daily Kaizen. But for sure, the cross-functional pieces get more tough when you get into tougher problems. And then, and this is so easy to miss, is never stop. So you can't manage a process for a month and then turn your back on it and expect it to self-manage. Processes don't manage themselves. The natural state of the universe is chaos. Things will devolve as quickly as someone starts not looking at it. So most of you are probably familiar with the Hawthorne effect. And the Hawthorne effect is where people, something improves simply because people are watching. That is exactly what you get with process management. So you have to never, never, ever stop. Now, when that process owner is in place, the keys to maintaining that outstanding process management are going to be making sure that the KPIs are relevant and they should not be necessarily static. So as processes are improving, you can swap out your KPIs and get different ones in place that now make more sense because you've slayed one dragon and you've got some stability in how the process is performing on that level, but now you want to get it performing well on this level. You have to have metrics-based maps that show how the process should work. So some processes can be managed at a value stream level with a value stream map. Some need to be more of a swim lane style, a process level map, depending on how much, how many handoffs there are in the process, how much opportunity there is within the process for things to fall apart. So it's, for those of you who don't understand the difference between value stream and process level maps, I've got previous webinars you can listen to. There's material on SlideShare. It's really important you understand the difference between value stream maps and process level maps. And actually my new book, Metrics-Based Process Mapping, also addresses it. The one that's the webinar is going to be on next week. That book just came off press 2 weeks ago, so it's brand new. Cross-functional improvement. So here's the thing for process owners that, I always joke with them and say you have to take a vow that you will never, ever, ever attempt improvement without involving a cross-functional team. And so this is, a new behavior that organizations have to adopt in order to get great process management, outstanding process management in place. You need to have exceptional socialization and training on the improved process. So here's another thing. We could have an entire webinar just on training. I find organizations often get good at finally documenting and having KPIs, and then they roll it out and no one follows it and they wonder why. It's because it wasn't well socialized and people don't understand how to do the new process. So they will revert back to their old behaviors, the old ways. That's just what we do as human beings. And then, of course, continuing monitoring and improvement, and then never stopping. So those are the keys to process management. And again, when you get these down, the people problems that you think you've had will simply go away. People that have been whiners and and infighting and not performing well, when they're actively engaged in improving the process and the process works well, so much of the frustration and stress of being in a non-functional workplace goes away that your people problems go away with it. So if you adopt this, you're going to watch poor performers start soaring, and poor performance is going to become exceptional and outstanding. And it's all because we stopped thinking that we have to manage people and we started turning our attention to process performance so we can get better systems in place. That's the goal. That's where we need to focus for 2013 and forward, is stop this madness, get better systems and processes in place, and take them one at a time. It's not going to happen overnight, but take them one at a time. So, wow, I went a little fast there, a little faster to try to catch up some time, but we did get it pretty close to noon so that we can have lots of questions, which of course is the best part of webinars, I think, are the questions. There's some information on how you can reach me and links to my book. If you're new to the webinars, I do give these webinars every month, and I welcome you to encourage you to subscribe to my newsletter or blog so that you can get that. And then the other thing I want to mention is when you log out of the webinar today, if you would please not just discontinue your browser. Don't just exit out of your browser, but do file and exit webinar. I've moved the 3 questions I ask at the end to that process instead of you getting an email the next day. And the reason why is I have a question in there about 2013 webinars and any needs that you have. I'm going to be repeating some from 2010 and 11 that I haven't done in 2012. But I also am developing some new ones, and I'm going to have more guest speakers next year. So please let me know what some of your needs and interests are so we can get the schedule for 2013 done as quickly as possible. So let's go ahead now and start taking some questions about this process management thing, because it's, it really is important, and it's the one thing that I think we've been fairly remiss in doing, is getting processes to where we have an actual owner who's minding the store on a daily basis. Not an easy thing to do. So take your questions now. And by the way, don't forget you can also raise your hand and I can unmute you now that we've got sound. And my apologies for that in the beginning. Okay, I have a couple questions about the materials. So I just want to mention again that the material links, for those of you who are new to the webinars, when you sign up, you register for the webinar, the links are on that confirmation email. They're on the reminder email you get the day before the webinar. And then the link that was in the chat today, I had corrected it the first time we went live, and then when I started the webinar, then I didn't get the new link in there, so my apologies. So it's my website, ksmartin.com/files/webinar materials, and then the convention is the month, day, and year, 2 digits, and 4 digits with a hyphen between. So in this case it'd be 11-01-2012, and it's either _handout or _slides.pdf, depending on whether you want a handout with 2 slides per page to save paper or if you want full slides. So I hope that helps. And I will actually, I'm going to just actually do this here. I'm going to put a new slide here so that you can see that easier. Whoops, K.S. Martin. And I'll take your questions. I see some coming in. Files, webinar materials. You get to see how clunky my typing is when a lot of people are watching me. And then so it's 11/01/2012 underscore handout PDF or underscore slides.pdf. Okay, that's the link to the materials. And they're also going to be on SlideShare, and the recording will also be on Vimeo in a couple of days. Okay, they're dead links. Not these links. I just tested these links. So this is the links that are on your slide right now on your screen. Those are the links to try. So go ahead and try those. I don't think that those are dead links. Okay, so let's take a question. Would you comment on individuals being process owners of their own daily planned work that should be standardized, measured, and improved? I don't understand this. Would you comment on individuals being process owners of their own daily planned work that should be standardized, measured, and improved? I'm not sure what this means. Process owners are not processes just of their own work. They're owners of an entire process from order to delivery or request to receipt. So, I mean, obviously people can improve their own daily work, but that's not what we're talking about here in terms of process management. That's a bigger, process management's bigger than just someone's own work. And I would also recommend that people not necessarily be given the responsibility and the latitude, frankly, to just standardize their own work in a vacuum. I think it needs to be looked at holistically and systematically. Okay, next question is, would you consider the following future topic, what is included in exceptional socialization? Yeah, I would, and I'll go ahead and talk about that right now. So socialization to me is about consensus building, and training is about skill development. So socialization has a big why behind it. Why is this important? Why are we doing this? Why did we make these changes? And getting people to understand that it makes sense. So when processes when they're not sustainable, much of the time it's because no one understands the value in doing it a certain way, whatever the it is. And so if you can just get everyone socialized so that they are able to understand what the performance issues are, what the needs are of the customer, and then why the change that's being changed is being made, that's one thing. The second thing is that you need to make sure when you have cross-functional teams working together that the representative from every functional area is going back to their functional area and helping them understand why what is happening to the process is necessary. So it shouldn't necessarily be, an improvement professional, for example, that's going back and telling a department this is why it's being done. The people that represented the improvement from that department should be the ones selling that and helping people understand why the improvement's being done. That's much more effective socialization than having what I consider a third party in the game, in the mix. So, okay, I'm going to move on. Those are just some ideas for exceptional socialization. All right, next question. Awesome webinar, great content. I agree about processes. I'm just seeing if there's a question here. Yeah, it's just a, yeah, I'm not going to, that's not a question, so I'll go ahead and move on from that one. Okay, next one. How do you re-energize people who've been through lean implementations before and for whatever reason champion left, etc.? Well, so I assume you mean that you did a lean implementation at a company and now you want to kind of jumpstart it or get it going again. I assume that's what you mean. So I think one of the first things to do is to help people understand why it wasn't successful the first time. So do a root cause analysis on it, do a PDSA, and if people are cynical, which they often are, I would invite them to be part of the PDSA. What didn't work for them? Why did it not work on their part? And, if it's leadership if leadership had it, the wheels fall off. Sorry. Okay. Well, why do the wheels fall off? I guess I always go back to root cause. Why do the wheels fall off? Really? I mean, I'm asking a serious question. Why do the wheels fall off? So if you do root cause on that, the answer is not leadership necessarily. So if leadership is the reason why the wheels fall off, I will tell you that I meet with executives all the time, and they say, these teams went through and they had this great process they improved, and they had key performance indicators, and I can't manage processes on a daily basis, and all of a sudden I hear from customers that it's gone back to the old ways, and they're getting horrible results, and it's all broken again. I don't know what to do about this. And so I don't think it's leadership. I think it's lack of process ownership. I mean, I've been doing a lot of studying for a lot of years around this, and I think it's lack of process ownership. And so if the wheels fall off, it's at a process level first, and it needs to be corrected at a process level. Now, I will say, if you have leadership that don't embrace lean philosophically and as a practice, then of course you're not going to be successful with implementing lean, and I wouldn't even try. If you've got leadership that aren't bought into what lean can accomplish for the organization, at least a couple of influential leaders, if you don't have at least one of those people in the organization, then I won't take clients if I hear that. If I hear that leadership isn't behind, I'm not going to push my philosophy and the lean philosophy on people who don't want to embrace it. You have to. It's like a habit. People have to want to break a habit in order to be successful. So, okay, next question, not directly related to process management, but PDSA versus PDCA, is it just semantics or personal understanding? So I would recommend a couple things. One is I did post on Scribd, which is one of the icons here. I'll show you this one right here. Scribd is a social media site for documents. I did post a little part of my book that talks about PDSA and why I feel very strongly that we should be using PDSA. And I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but PDCA was a misinterpretation. This is the history of PDCA. It was a misinterpretation of some words by a Japanese businessman. It had nothing to do with Deming. In fact, Deming was pretty adamant that we should be using PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Adjust, because in his experience and in my experience as well, people get very confused on what check really means and what act really means. So study is linguistically much more accurate on what you're actually doing, and adjust is also much more precise to what you're doing. So healthcare has started by adopting PDSA in some circles, and I think we're going to be seeing a wave of PDSA in the coming years, because now that people are understanding that PDCA confuses people, PDSA clarifies. And in my book, The Outstanding Organization, of course, clarity is where I start, and that's one of the biggest things is we need to use precise language in order to get people understanding. Okay, last question. How do you sell the need to VPMD? VPMD, I'm not sure what that is, about the need for process owners. Oh, to VP or an MD, okay. About the need for process owners. How can we show what's in it for them, e.g. sell it? It's hard to show them what the new world will be like until you do it. So what I do is I focus on why the current world is not working. If the current world is working really well, then there's no need to change. And if the current world isn't working well, then I just talk through with people, why isn't it working? And eventually you can get them to see that indeed it's process ownership. And so there's no way to show people until you do an experiment. Most leaders will let you do one experiment in a limited area, and if you can get them to agree to that and understand that, of course, that is the nature of PDSA. It is experimentation. You put a hypothesis forth, and then you think about, or you identify root cause, you think about possible countermeasures, you select a countermeasure, you test it, and then you see if it worked or not, and if it didn't, you adjust. So that's what I would do, is just talk about what's not working. Oh, there's some good questions coming in. Okay, two more questions, and then we need to wrap. So can you expand on what is the process failure here? I believe sometimes we jump into root cause of something that might not be the root. Yeah, so good root cause analysis requires people take a collective breath and dig. It's CSI, investigation for process management. And so when something happens, the first question out of everyone's mouth should be, what is the process failure here? What are we not doing well? Why was this person not successful in doing whatever they need to do? And then you do the root cause analysis from there. And last question, I lead improvements as a coach facilitator. In order to do this well, is there a rule of thumb for the number of improvements that one person should lead? In other words, one person could get spread too thin, resulting in all team suffering or the team processes grinding to a halt. Good question. So I guess it depends on what you mean by leading. If you're the one that is actively facilitating because people don't have the skill set yet, and that's part of the path to develop their skill set, I personally only take 3 to 4 major process improvement projects at a time. And they can't be huge and highly political at 4. It'd have to be 3 or possibly even 2 for that. If they're smaller improvements, then I can take 5. But I probably wouldn't take more than that at a time. It really depends, I think, on the complexity and also the length of time it's going to take to complete it. So for A3s, if it's a big pesky problem that you're working through an A3 process, I would probably only take 2 of those at a time. But again, it depends on, if you're just coaching people, and I don't mean just in a diminutive way, I mean just in terms of a time period. When I'm coaching a team, I'm only coaching them, say, 2 hours a week. And so, there's a fair amount of bandwidth in there to take on other types of leading and other kinds of improvements. So that's what I would recommend. All right, so thank you so much. And again, I'm so sorry. Someone suggested on the questions, let's get to root cause for the sound problem. Yeah, you think? I'm going to be calling GoToWebinar the minute we get off of this to find out what the heck happened and why it suddenly worked, because I tried everything. And to this minute, I don't know, because I wasn't doing a good single factor experiment, I don't know what I finally did that got the sound on and why it went on and then off again. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to figure that one out, but I'll bet you GoToWebinar knows exactly what went on, because I'll bet you we weren't alone on that one. So thank you so much, and happy holidays. If I don't talk with you, I guess we won't talk before Thanksgiving, but hopefully I'll see you right after Thanksgiving for metrics-based process mapping. And you are so welcome, everyone who's saying thank you. You're so welcome. Thank you for those of you that hung in from across the country and across the globe. And good morning and good night for those of you that are in different time zones. Bye-bye. Thanks.